We love talking to Andrew Bogut, about so many things, and of course the host of the Rogue Bogue Podcast, but particularly because he's got a particular insight in the way that sport works these days, and he's unafraid to talk about it. Great man, how are you?
Going well, yourself?
Excellent. Now, let's have a chat here because Pride round last year in rugby league, it wasn't even a round. Manly went off and had their own Pride jersey, half the team. But at least 7 members of the team, we all know what had happened, and essentially the whole thing fell apart. Their season was completely destroyed. There was an attempt to introduce Pride round across the entire sport. That's not going to happen. Instead, there's going to be a respect round. But interestingly, a survey of coaches suggests that basically about half of them say bad idea because they know that significant numbers of their own players have got different religious beliefs than most of the people on Twitter who don't have any religious beliefs and are forcing these sort of kiss the ring exercises on people.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the same thing that happened in the NBL last week that we spoke about. There's people that are okay with people's sexuality but don't want to celebrate it. And I think that's fair enough. I think everyone should have their choice about what they celebrate. I don't think we need to be at a point in society where we're forcing people to celebrate things out of shame or out of the fact that they might get labelled certain words. That's a really dangerous way to go about things, especially when you look at world history and other things that have transpired over the last 100-odd years.
But also, I mean, rugby league has made quite the effort specifically, that sport, over the past, let's say 10 years, been longer than that, to make real inroads into islander communities. Certainly sort of New Zealand with its history across rugby league means, again, its connection to Pacific Islands. Now, I know that there are university professors that will turn around and say, well, I know that they say that's their religious beliefs, but it's really the white man who came and colonised them and made them, turn them into that. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Scoop. But if my belief is my belief, your belief is your belief, then again, these exercises are about saying, I support something. Now, if somebody doesn't want to support something, we all know what's going to happen. They're not going to get sponsored. They probably won't end up with the media coverage. There is more to lose from sitting it out than being part of it now. Times have well and truly changed. So if they're willing to do that because of fundamental religious beliefs, well, let's not be selective. Usman Khawaja doesn't have to wear a VB logo, but apparently the Polynesian rugby league player has to wear the rainbow jersey.
Yeah, it's a double standard, and it gets really interesting when you look at those different aspects. With there's a bunch of different things. There's alcohol, there's gambling, there's the list goes on and on and on, and it's there's no win to it. And I had a chuckle. I read that article about the respect round and had a laugh about it. How about this, Paul? How about we get back to just playing sport? How about the NRL just concentrates on rugby league and a basketball league concentrates on basketball? Because as we know, people have different beliefs, different opinions, and that's just the way of life. You have to respect that. And I guess to your point about people sitting out, you can't sit it out because you get labelled initially, straight away. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, well, if you don't want to wear a rainbow flag or if you don't want to support X agenda or Y agenda, just don't do it. Well, it doesn't work that way anymore. And I think that's what athletes are starting to realise is that I'm not against it. I'm not for it. I'm neutral. I'm on the fence. I don't want to be openly celebrating it, but I also have no problem with it. How you live your life, cool, get on with it. But they can't even do that anymore. You can't. You have to take the side, and it's just more and more divisive within the community, and it's just disappointing to me.
But also, there are corporate entities, right? If the NBL wants to change its logo to a rainbow logo, then they understand the sport of basketball backs it, right? If the NRL, AFL wants to change but as soon as you start getting down to, and you will be a soldier for the cause, there's going to be resistance, and resistance then ends up going the same.
Put it on the field, put it on the court, leave it off the jerseys, problem solved.
100%. So late last week, South Australian Premier says, you know what, New Year's test was garbage in Sydney, so let's move things around and make sure Adelaide gets a crack at that test. Roll the tape.
In South Australia, we've got an amazing record of people turning out to sporting events. I think we had doubled the crowd at the Adelaide test that we saw in the Perth test. We often have bigger crowds than Sydney, and that's despite having a far smaller population. So South Australians are passionate about their sport. They love their cricket, myself included. So we stand ready to work with Cricket Australia to improve their product to more people around the country.
Okay, and then the New South Wales Premier says a 5-day washout test in Sydney is much better than a 5-day test in Adelaide because at the end of the day, you've spent 5 days in Adelaide. I've got a strong view on this. What's yours?
I mean, a bit of banter is always fun, but we're one of the only countries in the world that gets this petty about states. We're one country. Every state and city, in my opinion, has pros and cons, and it comes down to state of origin with coffee, with food. Like, it's just, and then when you have the politicians throwing it backwards and forwards, it makes me laugh. I love banter, but I get a little chuckle at how the state of origin we get with. It could be the weather, it could be coffee, it could be our parks, our beach, and it just gets exhausting to me. But I think Sydney's going to end up keeping it. It's the big city and it's tradition. But I'm also against somewhat breaking traditions. I'm not afraid of that. We had the first Christmas Day game in Australian sporting history with the Sydney Kings, which was heavily frowned upon by half the community because you shouldn't do it because it's tradition. Well, it's like, well, we gave it a crack and it worked out pretty well. But
Exactly.
I had a little laugh at it all, to be honest with you, Paul. I'm not taking it too seriously.
My thing, look, I've never lived anywhere but this shit canning of places like Adelaide or something, like, come on. Like, the thing is, the reality about a lot of sport in Australia, right? And one day I'll be able to find out a way to tell everyone this story with detail. But every state government has got these things like Events New South Wales or Events Victoria, where they've got like a stack of cash about $500 million, right? And they pay for anything that basically happens in your state, right? It doesn't matter whether we're talking about, motor racing, major events, whatever happens, theatre productions. Like, there's money into Mary Poppins I was looking at the other day. Of course, it's all commercial and confidence, so we can't possibly work it out. But the reality is that if Cricket Australia wanted to turn around and auction off the 5 tests, whoever wants Boxing Day, you pay us the most. Well, that's exactly what happened in Rugby League. That's exactly what happened in the A-League. That's what happens in the NFL. That's probably what will happen into the future, which is this won't be decided by governments up front. It'll be behind the scenes, and it'll be who bids the most. All right, last one here, which is against...
And Paul, just real quick, not they pay, the citizens pay.
Yes, no.
Without a say, a lot of the time, as Victoria knows, you're big supporters of the Netball League right now.
Well, and also you can see when governments get it really wrong. Like, one of the reasons Peter Malinauskas was able to find a way to take out the Marshmallow, the former South Australian Premier, was because he cancelled the supercars race. Now, I know that, all the people that were sitting around divvying up the money, supercar, yuck, let's have electric cars and, liturgical dance festivals, right? But guess what? A couple of 100,000 people quite liked going to the supercars, so surprise, surprise, they say, I'm willing to put my taxes in, I'm willing to pay for the arts festival, I'm fine for the naked fire twirler who wants to do their bit in Rundle Mall, but can I please have my weekend where I get to watch all the broom brooms go round? So, Pat Cummins, he's absolute line in the sand. His views on climate change have not cost Cricket Australia a fossil fuel sponsor.
Whether they have or they haven't, who knows? But he was individually sponsored by them for a while, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Has he paid that money back yet?
Exactly.
I don't want to hear about it then, because you're a hypocrite. I mean, I'm all for athletes getting sponsorships and promoting things that even they don't believe in sometimes. I'm going to be honest with you. I have before. I've had sponsors that wasn't a huge fan of kind of what I was promoting, but they gave me money to say it was great, right? But I then on the next day didn't say, don't use that product, it's hurting the environment. That's where the hypocrisy comes in. Donate that money back, Cummins, and then I'll listen to you.
The Rogue Bogue Podcast, all of their sponsors, personally approved by Andrew. He's all good with them, as other ones here at Sky News. Thank you very much, great man. See you in a couple of weeks.